In this module, we're going to take a look at some of the very sophisticated techniques that ArchiCAD allows to make selections. Now keep in mind that ArchiCAD is a noun-verb system. And what that means is we always select what it is we want to modify, and then we decide what that modification is going to be, whether we want to move it or rotate it or mirror it or delete it, stretch it. Always select first. ArchiCAD allows some fantastic selection strategies, and I'm going to cover those right now. So the first thing we want to do is select the arrow tool if it's not already, and we need to set up these 3 parameters. So the first one is this choice where if in a marquee or a selection, if an element is even partially selected or contained, I should say, then it will be selected. This choice up here, the element has to be fully contained within the region. And this one, my preference, and what I strongly urge you to use, is directionally dependent. So let's take a look at that. So if I select from left to right, you'll notice that in that selection, I only picked up this one line because that's the only line that's fully contained within that selection region. If I go from right to left, I get all 3 lines because those 3 elements each had an element or at least one portion of them that were within the selection. So this allows you to very quickly identify which selection you want to make. With a little practice, it'll become very, very much a habit. You'll do it without even thinking. So keep this feature selected. We also have 3 different types of regions here. We can have a multi-faceted polygonal selection, a rectangular or rotated rectangle. Usually you're going to want to use the rectangle unless there's a specific reason not to. The magnet tool will work on elements that have that are a bounding type of element, for example, a roof or a slab or a fill. And I'll show you that now. So I know you're not supposed to be working with fills yet, but let's put in a fill over here. And you'll notice that if we go to our selection, the magnet is activated now because it's within the region of this fill. When I'm over here, the magnet disappears, and here's the region. Now there are times when I may have a fill over something I want to select, and if I want to box select, I can't actually start to make the box because it's selecting this fill. Now to temporarily disable the magnet, we can hold the space bar, and then that'll allow us to create our rectangle and make our selection. So space bar will temporarily disable the magnet. That's good to know. Go ahead and delete this fill. We'll come back to the fills a little bit later. Go ahead and delete that. Now another way to make selections is to use the marquee. We have the light single floor marquee, and we have a marquee that will select through all floors. We haven't talked about floors yet. We will in another module, but don't use this. This is very dangerous unless you really, really know what you're doing and you are very comfortable with ArchiCAD. The multiple floor marquee is very powerful and can be very destructive. So generally you're going to want to use the single floor marquee. If I put the marquee down and I hit Control A without any tool selected, I'm going to get every element that's contained or partially contained within that marquee. If, on the other hand, I have the same marquee, but I have the circle tool selected, I hit C. And now I hit Control A, only the circles are going to be selected. And similarly, if I select the lines, only the lines are going to be selected. So using the marquee in conjunction with Control A, in conjunction with one of the tools being selected, allows me to very quickly and strategically select elements for modification. So that is a very powerful technique that is easy to use and something that you'll find yourself taking advantage of often. Now, another thing to note is the fact that in certain situations, you'll find that there are multiple elements with a single node. And here's just a very simple example. It can be more complicated when you have walls on top of slabs on top of, with roofs on top of that, and trying to decide what you're selecting. Well, when you hover over a node, it's going to give you this little window that tells you that you have selected a solid line, gives you some information on that line, and it turns the line blue. If I hit tab, it's going to alternate between multiple elements. In fact, it's giving you a little bit of feedback right there. It says hit tab because there are multiple elements. When the element is highlighted, the one that you're interested in, just go ahead and click with the left button. If I want to add to that selection, I can hold shift and select, come over here and I can add with, if I continue to hold select, I can add to that selection, and then I can actually delete something from the selection, and I just by toggling it on and off. So with some practice, you'll find that that's a very powerful strategy to select, and the tab will run you through all of the choices that are available. Another interesting thing to use, and it's kind of a odd thing to use, but there's a way to select things by doing the undo and then redo. So if you have anything that you redo and undo, when you bring them back, they will automatically be selected. So some people use that as a common strategy, and you can play with that. I don't do it too often. The last thing I'm going to share with you is the use of the find dialog box. It's find and select, Control F. Very, very powerful tool, and you can select elements based on many, many different parameters. And let's go ahead and see how this works. So for instance, here we have it set up so the element is a line. We can change this to anything we want, and it can be even something more general like a 2D or a 3D element. We'll go ahead and keep it on the line, and we're looking only for solid lines. When I hit the plus, you'll notice that it selected all the solid lines, and this break line was not selected. The circles were not selected. If I change this to 2D elements and I hit the plus sign, now all the elements that have a solid line and that are 2D, you can see here, are selected, but not the break line. However, we can either come in here and explicitly choose that line type, which is fine. That if we wanted this line to be selected, we would do something like that. But an even more interesting tool is the Alt command. Will, just by holding Alt, will pick up properties. And you'll see that as soon as because this was highlighted blue, and this is the pickup settings, and the shortcut for that is the Alt, it changed all of the parameters to coincide with the element I selected. So if I come in here and do this one, now it's a circle with a solid line. If I come up here and do this one, it's a line with the line type break. And this is a great way to pick up the properties of a certain element so that you can find all of them in a particular drawing and then make the modification as necessary. So use this. You can add so many different features or parameters, and you can go on and on. You can nest them. You can continue to add them. And it's a very, very sophisticated way of making selections, probably the most sophisticated. You can also, if you select all, you can deselect using the similar strategy. So all of the elements that meet this criteria, you can deselect. And using the store command, you're able to create selection sets that you might find yourself using from time to time. So take some time and practice using this. Become comfortable with it, because if you can become comfortable with it, you will use it more often than not, and it's very powerful. cool little thing that ArchiCAD allows us to do for our selections. In the next video, we're going to be talking more about using the defaults, picking up properties and injecting properties. And that'll be a relatively short video, but we'll jump into that.